Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency. The former labor secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Costa, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the stabbing?
Yeah, sure. If
Hey,
I
Pam,
could,
could I just interrupt for
Sure.
1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to?
Welcome to The Last American Vagabond. I'm excited to have James Lee back on today to discuss what he's seeing going on in the world. He's doing a great job of breaking down, the insights and what he sees in the different political chaos today. He did it with last interview. We discussed his really great short mini documentary around the ADL. I really still recommend you check this out because it is just a perfect short encapsulation of what that entity really is and what it's tied to. Today, we're going to discuss kind of what he's seeing around, as obviously Epstein conversation, the Trump administration, Israel infiltration, and just whatever else is going on in his mind. So, James, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing good, Ryan. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure, brother.
Discuss today, huh?
Yeah, as always. Well, and again, that ADL documentary, it really clearly at a right moment for people to see. There's a shifting conversation around Israel, Zionism, and it's what's interesting about that topic, as I'm sure you keep finding out and you saw with that investigation, is this stuff is very surface level. It's not like it's really even hidden that well. It's just that it's there and people are afraid to talk about it. And I think this whole, thing is unraveling in front of us. It's an interesting and alarming kind of time at the same moment, But before we get into some of the things that I wanted to get into that I think are relevant, that I want your take on, work that you've done, something I've been asking people I have on lately, just because there's so much swirling around 24 hours later, our entire perspective can change, right? With the way it's going today. So right now, what jumps to your mind? What an investigation you might be involved in right now? What's kind of the forefront on what you're looking at today?
Wow. I mean, that's a loaded question because I am looking into a lot of things. I think obviously, per your intro, like Epstein comes to mind for a lot of people, right? It's now that they're telling us, hey, this guy basically didn't even exist. Why are we still talking about this guy? It only piques a lot of people's, including my curiosity of like, okay, we've uncovered a lot about him. What else is out there? Let's dig everything up. What could be related? Let's link some dots. Recently, I've been looking into his ties to Peter Thiel. And one of the reasons why I'm looking into that is Peter Thiel has his hands all over government and the private sector. He's one of the most powerful and well-connected people probably in all of America. And he, to me, the stuff that I'm looking at is like, there's a lot of parallels, a lot of similarities. I'm not saying they're exactly the same. I'm not making insinuations that Peter Thiel is trafficking young children or anything like that. But there's certainly a lot of similarities in terms of their like personal proclivities around sex and doing that kind of thing and having fun in that world, but also being tied into various intelligence, tied into business, high level people, and having connections in high levels of government to say, hey, is this guy potentially Epstein 2.0?
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting thought. I actually hadn't even considered that. Like something that I've thrown around in the past that I don't ever think has been necessarily like definitively proven, but there's a lot to add to it, is the thought of whether Charlie Manson might have been a representation of like an Epstein of his time. Like there's all the different interconnected points of, his little harem. He had, the connection to the Hollywood scene and, obvious connections to intelligence. Very interesting thought. So to that forward point to today, is that another representation? That's a really interesting thought. I'm interested to see where you're going with that in the work. So, any other thoughts to kind of add to that in regard to, is it just like, before you even answer, what's interesting is the technology, eugenics, transhumanism, technocracy kind of elements of Thiel are very present in Epstein, which I'm sure you're aware of, but don't get a lot of attention. So is that the only real thing, or are there any more to that side of what do you think makes that case right now? Unless you don't want to get into it because you're building.
Let's get into it. No, I think there's a couple of things there, right? The one is the point that you mentioned, which is a lot of people focus a lot on Epstein's trafficking of young girls on the sexual side of things, the massages and all those things. But to your point, there is a huge academic project that Epstein is tied to with this kind of transhumanist thing. I think him and Peele were very simpatico in that vision. And I mean, if you look it up, there is accounts of people not just talking about how they were sexually abused during their time on Epstein Island, but they were talking about being experimented on. And one of the people, I don't know if you come across her testimony, right? Juliet Bryant. Are you familiar with her testimony?
I haven't spoken to her, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so she's talking about being experimented on in terms of Epstein Island, getting all kinds of science stuff, waking up in the middle of the night in a laboratory, and doctors and people like poking and prodding her. And you have to understand the thing about Peter Thiel is that he is out there in terms of there's a lot of reporting done on how he like injects young children's, not children, but 18 blood, and he does these like $40,000 operations, procedures every quarter. So there's that linkage of like, hey, what's going on here? And then I think the thing that you just pulled up is like, hey, there's like some massive investments that we don't even know what they're for, as far as like Thiel and Epstein back in, I think it was around 2014, right? Epstein investing $40 million in one of these Thiel funds that we don't really understand what it's for. Is it what kind of projects are behind it? What are they investing in? So that's kind of the tie. And you have to understand Thiel also is connected to Epstein beyond just the first, after he became a criminal sex trafficker, then he came into the picture. So it's like, okay, you're associating with this guy after that. So then there must be there's something going on. I think there's a clip from Rogan that exists where Peter Thiel talks about how he met Jeffrey Epstein. And it was just like, well, he was introduced to me as a really good tax guy and just thought he was really smart. And the whole exchange was just really weird. Like, okay, so maybe he's good at taxes, but he's also a sex trafficker. And plus he's investing $40 million, which he neglected to say in that interview that came out later.
Peter's a bad liar. He's very transparent. I'm serious. We've seen the clips of him like trying to parse through like even just like, what about Israel? And he's like shuts down. It's clear that he has these things. I don't know why he puts himself out there like that. But my thought is that was clearly a moment where he was, aware of what was going on. And to your point, he was aware then. The timing is clear. There's plenty of people out there that have, even that, I forget her name now, was on stage after this became like the everybody knows point, was like, we all knew he was doing this. I forget her name. And everyone's like, what did you just say? You all knew it, but that's kind of the sentiment. It's like everyone was afraid to say anything. But I think the point is that Thiel was not just aware and not saying anything, but he was immersed and overlapped with that. Now, that doesn't have to mean, unless you're, maybe you know more of your investigation, that he's involved with those things. But obviously it's a valid thing to consider, at the very least, that you're not concerned with those kind of proclivities. And that says a lot to me. Oh, and one more thing.
The point is, this stuff is continuing today. We kind of think we're framing the Epstein issue, and Trump is, as a thing of the past, right? Oh, look at this creep. Like, we don't need to talk about him anymore. It's basically done deal. Like, we've eliminated this guy. But these kinds of things are still going on without, a lot of scrutiny over like, hey, what's going on with these experiments? Are people being trafficked against their will, not maybe for a sexual reason, but for more of like science experiments? Is that still happening? Because there's a lot of records showing that it was once happening, and he's investing in all different kinds of these companies that do all sorts of things that, there's just not a lot of oversight. And also he's really powerful. He's tied into basically every single major office in Trump's cabinet, and also to all these different tech companies. He's got his hand all over it.
And my worry is, the U.S., I think it gives a lot in regard to being immersed with this administration, this government. But I think I'm more worried about what they do outside, without like even less oversight in their Prospera Freedom City in Honduras, like things like that, where it's like, I don't think there's any, like, it's a lawless reality as far as I'm concerned. And so I worry there's a lot more of that going on in the world. But you're right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He has a bunch of these like islands that he's developing everywhere. And based on, we don't really know what's going on there. Are there people there? Are there not people there? There's just not a lot of public information about that unless you're tied in and you get a chance to go there. So we don't even know if there's humans there. Are there people living on these islands? Are they for what he says? I mean, it's kind of like utopia kind of thing, or like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, it's a worrisome thing. I mean, that goes into the work. Like, I'm more worried about this kind of technocratic transition that we're witnessing. I mean, I'm sure you saw the Detachment 201 bringing in literal, I think it was OpenAI, Palantir, and Meta, their CTOs became part of the military, like actual lieutenant colonels. I just talked to Brad Miller, the one he resigned in protest for the COVID shot from 101st Airborne, and just, he was just ripping that apart and how alarming it is. It's like there's a lot of that happening. I'm worried about these. As there's a couple names for them. Trump floated the Freedom Cities point, which a lot of people pointed out was just 15-minute cities with another name, but that there's that Prospera aspect, or even in El Salvador in a way, like the way that they're, because he's a proud Zionist, he's a technocrat, Bukele, and what they're overlapped with. I think there's got a lot of these trial balloons. And I think what we're seeing is sort of like this slow transition into what they want to be, this kind of technocratic hellscape, as I would describe it, But that's a whole other aspect of this, unless you want to get into that. The eugenics and experimentation. I mean, this was going on for such a long time. And we know this going back, before, even like World War II, for example. My point is, after World War II, the U.S. government absorbed all of the worst parts of what they claimed they were trying to fight, whether it was Dr. Ishii in Japan with their biological experiments, or the Nazis with, so this stuff has continued. Now, I'm of the mind that this stuff is not happening. It's more about something like during warfare, for example, like in Syria, there was many reports of just, trafficking, organ sales, like things going on. I think the same thing happens in Gaza. So that's what I worry about with these things going on under the guise of, war and other things that we don't see, Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are literal reports of like, hey, are they experimenting on people in Gaza? Like, there's literal reports of that happening right now. And I don't want to say it out loud here, but there's some stark parallels here of what happened, between 1938, 39 and 1945. So do we care about that? And I think that's where, for a person like myself, I think I'm sort of known for this like deep research stuff. But for me, it's like I'm coming at from a normie American perspective to say, okay, where, my interest in this is like, where are we spending all our resources as a nation, right? You can see, you're walking around, you're wherever you live, and you see things are becoming more and more dilapidated. Things just seem to have gotten worse in the last decade, maybe even longer than that. And you're wondering, okay, so what's our government prioritizing? It seems to be, we're prioritizing war in Israel, Ukraine, and we're investing and getting tied into all these like tech oligarchs. It seems like we're doing a surveillance state. We're creating the conditions of, I would say, revolution. So it's like almost creating a need to manufacture this consent to say, oh no, we need all of these agents on the ground because look, people are doing bad things everywhere. And to me, I'm like, well, they're doing bad things because you've kind of pushed a lot of people to wit's end. And what else are they going to do? And so it's kind of like this perfect storm, whether it be on purpose or not on purpose, right? That's the conspiracy, whether this is being done maliciously, but the end result is pretty much the same, that, hey, we're going to get this surveillance state, whether we like it or not. And it seems to be that all the people in power, the powers that be, are somewhat aligned in that vision.
We saw that during COVID, as you pointed out yourself, kind of the lockstep of supposed adversaries, which I do think in many ways are adversarial, but when it comes to control over our lives, they're all happy to take what they can get, in my opinion, But yeah, I think that this is clearly going, sprinting in the direction of whatever you want to call it, whatever you see it to be. I think we all notice it right now, but the way I would frame it, whatever you think is happening, that our government is doing things at the expense of Americans for their benefit, for their agenda. This is the confounding thing for a lot of MAGA right now. And let's actually touch on that before we get into Epstein, because I think Epstein is one very clear example of something that seems to be fracturing what I would argue is the most, the grouping of people that really believe in the core values of this country, the Constitution, what we want, but have been tricked, I think, into thinking that's what was happening, But, you can see this awareness developing, and through that, before we get into anything else, what do you think about that with Epstein and the MAGA movement? And for example, there's a few different points we've seen, even the immigration part, where it seems they're kind of fracturing. What do you think of that? Do you think that's real? Where do you think it's going?
I think it's real in a lot of ways. From the grassroots level, I think that's very real. I think you have to separate MAGA from influencer MAGA versus like real MAGA, people who are not in media, people who are just living their lives and believe in Donald Trump. I think there is a big chasm that's developing here. And the reason why I think is because over the course of maybe the last 5, 6, 7 years, there's been this like focus in terms of the conservative movement on like, hey, we need to be out there at the forefront of protecting children. And that's kind of their big cultural separator from the Democrats, who are out there promoting like LGBTQ values and trans rights and all this stuff. And then on the other side, it's like, no, we need to get back to like the family values. We need to protect children, like we don't want trans, whether you like it or not, it's like, we don't want trans people, we don't want drag queens reading to our kids. So every issue is kind of like centered around, hey, this is our future here. Children are the future. We need to protect them, whether it be like this issue with Epstein of like, child sex trafficking, pedophiles, and this kind of thing, or like the abortion movement of like, hey, these are real people. These are real humans, like protect the children. So there's a lot of issues like tie people together in that sense, or the sports thing as well with the trans sport. We have to protect that as well. And this is all of a sudden the first time where, or one of the biggest issues out there that he's running on to say, oh no, we actually don't care about this. And I think that's a huge incongruence to say, well, how could you be the party of protecting children if you're literally saying, hey, no, let's forget about this pedophile. Let's not put anybody in jail. Let's not prosecute anybody. Like is Ghislaine Maxwell, if she was in charge of a huge sex trafficking ring, I suppose she was sex trafficking for somebody, right? It can't be just Epstein. Like I know he was quite prolific in his activities, but he, there's a lot of other people involved in this. And so to say that it doesn't matter, I think that's a bridge too far for a lot of people. And that's just pushing things. I think the lie is just so bold. It's just too much. I've heard a lot of people put it that way. It's just like, they know that we know they're lying to them.
Right.
And they are still doing it.
Yeah, well, since you put it that way, and I do want to get it. I have the point you made with Sager and Tucker, which I agree. It's interesting that everyone knows, right? It's very, very interesting and obvious. But since you put it that way, briefly go ahead to a point I want to get into the Israel overlap. Why do you think? I mean, this is what I get from people when you talk to, somebody who believes in Trump, right? They see it. We're all noticing that. They're very uncomfortable with this, but many of them still decide, maybe because Kamal's worse, whatever the logic is, to stick with this. But the question they get stuck on is, why would they do this? It's political suicide. So it's almost like they can't get past that. And so they don't go any further because there must be a reason that I'm not seeing, kind of a thing. But so in your mindset, I agree with the logic that this is shooting themselves in both feet. Destroying any kind of credibility you had with your biggest following. What do you sense from that? Outside influence? Do you think they just don't believe what they're saying? Like, what is your read on that?
So this is pure speculation, but there's there's two main theories thrown out. Is that like Trump is heavily implicated in this, and he has personal stake where he doesn't want this information to come out. The other is obviously some kind of national security issue, foreign influence, spies, CIA, Mossad, that kind of thing. And the way I see it, it's like, okay, Trump, yes, he has this like thing with women, but the underage girls, I think that's just maybe a bridge too far for him to have crossed. We'll see, if his information maybe comes out. That's not what I believe. I'm firmly on the line of, hey, this is possibly something to do with national security. They don't want this coming out because it's a big can of worms, because the CIA has already been implicated, not that many people know, but implicated in this kind of like pedophilic activity through their intelligence work. So all of a sudden now you have more and more information coming out. You could really undermine the institution itself of like our whole entire intelligence apparatus. So if once you start unraveling this thing, I don't think there is an end to it. So they said, hey, we just got to put a stop to it right now. And in terms of them doing it this way, I just think that sometimes when you're in command, like a person like Trump, who is such a cult of personality and so many people worship him, that can sometimes get in your head and you're like, hey, I think I could just do anything and they'll go along with it, right? That goes back to his infamous line of like, hey, I could shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue and people will still vote for me. This is like taking it to the absolute limit to say, hey, what else can I just boldly lie to their face, right? It's that 1984 quote where, what's that quote where basically the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their most, final and most essential command, that kind of thing, where I know that that I'm lying to you. You just got to go with me here. And I think that's probably what's going on in my eyes.
Yeah, that's very, I agree. That makes the most sense. Like even the intelligence point, like I could very much wrap my mind around Trump being convinced that doing this would be the end of what he believes he's fighting for. And that guess that's in the vein of thought that Trump is actually fighting for what he believes is best for this country. I very much questioned that today. There was one point at which I was pretty convinced that he was being corralled and cowed, which I do think is a large part of it. But there's some things today that make me really question whether there's more to that. Maybe even just blackmail and threatening, like, we talk about with RFK. But clearly that does make sense that he could be convinced that this would, bring down something that he's fighting for. But still, it's the contradiction to what you just described. He is guided by his hubris. I think we all can admit that. And I think very clearly that doesn't make sense. Like there's a lot of examples where I just go, I don't think he would make himself look that bad, unless, again, there's a larger point to it. But what I tend to think is that or at least largely consider, is that it doesn't add up to me that they would destroy every bit of credibility, every bit, just for this push. So I wonder if there is some element of this that is somehow trying to bring down this country, which is interesting because I see a lot of the thought process of that coming. Like even the Republicans before this point were quick to make that point without any evidence about China. 1,000-year plan about or 10,000-year plan about China. And that's good. We should consider that very much so. But interesting now that there's never been more evidence coming from another country that it seems that most really don't want to acknowledge that or get into it, or at least on the higher up coverage of this. And so that's where I kind of go with it, is that it seems that there's something happening here that is implicating a foreign country. And we know that's the case, at least in part, with Mossad. And so then it comes down to the point of, that you were kind of making there, that it's not, the real point is not about covering up the sex trafficking. That is an apparatus around the system that it's about highlighting, or rather keeping secure, the blackmail network, I think, that keeps all of this in place. Where do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's probably what it's at. And I think at this point it's gone too far. I mean, you have people like Tucker Carlson who are out there openly saying that, hey, this is the thing. For me, some people are saying, hey, this Trump's life could be in danger, or he's playing some sort of 67D chess here where this is the real way to take down the system. I think this is clearly there's no state deeper than kind of the intelligence apparatus that we have built here over the last 70 years. And it's really strong and it's really powerful. It's really tough to take down. And that's kind of where I'm sitting at. And I do think, that there is going to be a breaking point when it's just too much for Americans to accept. And there's only two routes. Either one where we're going to get transparency and we're going to get accountability, or the other is just more censorship, more top-down surveillance. When I think of the two directions it could go, right? If you look at, let's say, the alligator Alcatraz, right? They're saying, hey, that's for illegal immigrants. That's a processing center. And I'm like, well, the people there, I could very much see in the very near future that it's going to be people who criticize Israel that is going to be sent over there. and that's what it's going to be for, because there's really no other way than, if you want to keep the current world, the order in place, other than accountability or censorship. You choose one of the two, and let's see what happens. And everything points to the second, with all this increase. If you want to talk about ICE, I don't know if ICE is really there to deport people, even though that's what they say it's for. You're basically turning in, and somebody gave me this great perspective, Greg Stoker, who's a U.S. Army Ranger, and he kind of opened my eyes, and he said, hey, at this point in the United States, we don't necessarily have that power projection abroad anymore. It's not 2003 anymore, and we can't just send everybody everywhere and take over other countries. So let's do that here at home, and let's continue the military industrial complex, but on a domestic level. And very much we're creating the conditions for that need.
Yeah, there was a document. I would bring this up lately, and I keep forgetting what I didn't find this out, but I think it was something like Battlefield America, but I feel like it's a show. But there was something like that the intelligence apparatus put out, and it got circulated, but I don't think it was meant for average people to look at. But it simply highlighted, and it's not the first time, that projecting in the future that the American people would sort of be their primary enemy. And that's a common thing. I think that's always how the governments view this. I think the biggest threat to them is that they lose control of their population. That's the immediate threat all the time. And so I agree with him. And I think that this is, kind of a, I wouldn't even call it a come to Jesus moment for Americans to kind of recognize that, okay, this is happening. It's building. It is, whatever the narrative is, it's offense is offense. Whatever you want to, whatever your logic for why it's there, it's about the people coming after you. It's well, it also keeps you in. It's clearly what this thing is. And so I'm just glad that people are finally starting to really call this out. And I'm glad you bring up the ICE and immigration point, because my God, Trump, it's 6 times now. 6 times has floated casually the idea of Americans being deported or put in prisons And to be clear, he was talking about naturalized citizens in many cases, but he said and born here in 2 different interviews. So I mean,
homegrown. I mean, he said the homegrown comment, even though people say he was joking around, whatever.
He said it many times.
I mean, I do believe that they do think that, hey, anything that goes against the project that we're currently building here is a national security threat. So if you're out here criticizing American foreign policy, no matter if you're an American or not, you are basically a roadblock or barrier to us accomplishing this. And we don't want that.
Right.
So whatever we can do. And for me, it's like, okay, is there, I mean, for the Americans, it's like, okay, we're supposed to have a justice system that takes care of this. Like deportation should not be in the picture. It's like, hey, did this dude commit a crime or not? Is speech a crime? Is investigating, the government a crime? Is that like, what are they getting people for? And I think that's the kind of the big sort of scary question that we're going to have to face in the upcoming probably year or two is like, okay, how aggressive are they going to be here?
Right. Well, I think it depends on how much we push back, just like you were highlighting. I think it's kind of a give and take. And if we, as a populace, don't stand up in enough force, and I mean that in the sense of just being present, not violence, I think the power structure, as always, I shared a talk about this, that in the form of a protest, it's something like 3.5%. There's a number even police have. The government too, that if it goes beyond a certain number, they know they just can't deal with it. They don't have enough jail cells, whatever it is. So they know they have to stand down. And that's the same point when it comes to any of these things. Is if they recognize that not enough of us are together and pushing back, that's when they can take advantage. And this is just a classic idea. So, I mean, it's about us as a collective, as a population, rather, seeing these things, calling them out and stopping, the partisan divide and all. The ICE thing is just, look, there are people being deported that should be deported. They're here illegally. It's like, that's real, but there's endless examples, the majority, in my opinion, of people that are legally here, whether they have a green card, a visa, or going through the process of one of them, which is, it's funny that this is what we tell people they should do. And then as far as I could tell recently, the biggest portion of people that have been removed or arrested are those that are literally just going through the process of trying to become a U.S. citizen. It kind of just shows you that it's really just about the numbers and about presenting some kind of a win. And I want to make a point about Stephen Miller when we get past the Israel part, because he seems to be the central architect for a lot of this. And he's a very, very obvious Zionist. And I think he's got some ulterior motives in all of this. But let's talk about the Epstein overlap, because it really does connect to a lot of these parts, right? Even like the immigration aspect, even the aspect of foreign policy, Israel, the kind of intersection of a lot of it. So before we get into the other, kind of evolution of the narrative, which is funny, let's go to the end point, which is happening right now, is this, which I love that you said Epstein files. Like, it's such a funny, it's not that Obama and the obvious, like, is there anybody that doesn't know, even Democrats, that whole Russia thing, it was a complete fake? Like, everyone was aware of this. Not that it shouldn't be called out. We know it should be, somebody should go to jail. We all agree with that. But for them to jam this in your face now, it just, like you said, it's obvious what's happening, even though that's important. So what are your take on that, and, Charlie Kirk and the rest of it?
Right. My take on this is that this would have been a bombshell finding if Epstein didn't exist, or if they handled the Epstein thing differently, where it's like, okay, let's go after this, because this seems like not so good. It seems like they're concocting something behind the scenes to implicate Trump in something that he didn't do. Are you guys is this just like a news cycle to distract people and saying we're doing something, or are they going to go after Obama and say, hey, we should prosecute? Is there a crime committed here? That's kind of where I'm thinking of it. Like, everything now seems to be a distraction from that central issue of like, hey, are you going to bring people to justice that you promised? Like, you literally were out there saying all kinds of things, starting from, okay, let's release the files, right? JD Vance, let's release the files. And then Pam Bondi says we have 10,000 hours of footage of horrible things being done to children. What we want to know, right? We don't want to re-victimize, like Kash Patel said. We just want to know, okay, who was on those tapes? What are those individuals, or who are those individuals, and what are we going to do to them? Are we going to prosecute them for the crime that they committed? Like, what's going on here? And all of a sudden now to say, well, this is a huge hoax. The Democrats actually made all this stuff up. It's too far-fetched. It's not the right way to handle this. And that's why it's blowing up in their face, even though Charlie Kirk, I think that post in a vacuum is totally fine, right? That's a big bombshell. But everybody else in the comments, it's not just me. Everybody in the comments is like, Epstein files, Epstein files, Epstein files. Like, we don't care about this right now. It's just give us those files, because that's the big obfuscation that's happening here. Everything else that Trump is going to claim as a win is going to be seen as a distraction. You need to handle this in order to move on to your other priorities. Like even I think mass deportation, which a lot of people in the MAGA base are for, even that's now going to be seen as something that, oh, are you just trying to distract from the fact that you're not going to go after these pedophiles? Because that's the whole narrative that's been building up for 5 years, is that there's this like, pedo ring that's running the government. And now all of a sudden you say, no, that actually doesn't matter anymore. We don't care about
it. You're right. Like,
or does it? Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore.
I'd be willing to bet, like you said, if he would have just said, here's why it doesn't matter in the moment, he probably would have had enough support to keep that floated. But the fact that it didn't even exist, it's like, that's banking on the majority of people being either just blind following sycophants or too dumb to know that doesn't make sense. But I don't agree with that. I think the vast majority of his base are good people that want good things. And they came to that and were like, but wait a minute, like, I can't even find a way to make this make sense, like they want to. And so you're right. It was a step too far, but that's why I asked, why? Like,
well, that's why I think it is probably to do with Israel national security, because they could literally say, hey, we just can't release this right now because national security is at stake. That would obviously be a good reason not to, but it would also mean that we would have to reevaluate our foreign policy with one of our closest allies, quote unquote. And that there's just too many powerful forces to push back against that, right? Because I think the right way to go about things going forward is that we just have to reevaluate our relationship with Israel. We just have to, because there are many other allies in the region for us. It's not just Israel. We could ally, we are allies with like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all these other countries that we can still get what we need in the Middle East. Because they're saying, hey, no, Israel, it's not just, it's not Israel. It's actually us needing to dominate that region or have influence in that region. I'm like, there's other countries in that region that we could be working with. Even Iran, we worked with Iran probably because we, overthrew their government and installed one that we like. But there are other countries that we can ally with that we could still sort of project our power abroad if that's sort of their vision to do that kind of thing. I have my personal disagreements with that kind of imperialist idea, but even if that was your end goal, there are other countries that we can go through to make that happen. So I think that's probably the biggest force, is like, hey, we just don't want any kind of opening for this to happen. Like we can't have this Israel-US separation and all these Zionist forces that, I'm going to say are in government media all over the place.
Yeah, right.
That's forcing this issue.
Absolutely. And it's funny that's even contentious. It's a verifiable fact. And it's not the same as saying a Jewish person. It's frustrating that has to constantly, all the asterisks every time. But we know why, because there's people that are weaponizing this idea on all sides, Christian Zionists and atheist Zionists, which exist.
Yeah. And I was banned from TikTok last week for talking about, for insinuating that potentially our FBI director could be in a honeypot situation. And it was a really nice, I would have to say that the video itself was not that controversial, right? I basically cited facts and what other people are saying and say, hey, make up your mind. Is he being compromised?
I'll include it in the show notes. It's a good video and it's a valid question to ask. And the fact that they just banned your account, it speaks volumes. It really does.
Yeah. And I actually just got it back yesterday, but it was through connections and people higher up saying, hey, you guys got to look at this situation. If I didn't have that avenue, I would still 100% be banned. And I don't know for sure. They didn't give me a reason of why they banned me, but that video was taken off because I had posted that, I remember, last Friday. And I was checking, as like I had 50,000 views, and I remember going to bed, or right before I went to bed, checking again. I was like, within 20, 30 minutes, I had gotten from 50 to 140,000. I was like, oh shit, this is taking off. Went to bed and woke up, you open the app up, it just immediately logs you out. Boom, it's done.
Right. In the past, what I notice is, it's the same thing. If somebody out there had a TikTok account with 3 followers, they could say literally whatever they wanted and they likely wouldn't take their account down, no matter how bad, no matter how offensive. But it's because, this is the same thing I noticed. The very first time that I had a video that went over 1 million views on YouTube, and also at a point when we passed 100,000 subscribers with the first one, it's like something switched into place. It's like that. It's about the momentum. It's about the reach. They just can't, the power structures, varying power structures that don't want certain things out. That's what they'll do. They'll step in and shut that down. But you're right that the average person doesn't have the access to somebody to petition the top, and that's what they bank on at the end of the day, And I'm glad you got it back.
I got it. Yeah. And always, or I don't want to say, but it's almost always to do with these kind of like Zionist forces. Similarly, when I did reporting on the Georgia law enforcement exchange program, where Atlanta cops are being sent to Israel for training, that video was also reported by the director. I found out this through a public records request that another journalist did, and he just reached out to me and said, "Hey, by the way, I just want to let you know that your video and your name came up, and the director sent your video to the FBI saying that I was spreading anti-Semitic hate and very dangerous and things like that. And all I was doing was pointing out, hey, we have a bunch of people tied into AIPAC that's funding this cop city. And these police officers are going to Israel. They're doing all the training there. They're coming back. They're implementing all these oppressive tactics on, student protesters and people's, free Palestinian movement. And we should really think about it. It's like, why should American police be sent over there? Like, shouldn't we be training our own police? Like, what's this all about? Like, why is Israel tied into this? And why are we spending money? And why are billionaires who are tied into AIPAC funding this kind of thing? Like, it's an investment for them. So like, what's the return they're getting? For me, I kind of posited that it was because it's going to have an impact on the way cops feel in terms of their bias. And like, hey, this is where our allegiance lies. Like, that's why we're going to act in a certain way. They're buying influence.
Clearly, we just saw that. Like I think you just said, in regard to Colombia and other places, we are watching the way that works, But regardless of the outcome, it's funny. It's just frustrating and obvious that you're reporting on a valid thing. The intention, the idea that by saying those things, you mean hatred, it's just, that's, first of all, even if you actually did, that's not a crime. And you're allowed to say and think what you want. At least that's what we pretend in this country, but clearly that's not what you were doing. There's a valid point to be made about this kind of infiltration and manipulation. And all that aside, how about the fact that government is literally committing a genocide in contradiction of every law that we know, but it's okay that they train our police. It's like it's just, there's so many obvious reasons, but these are the things that are falling apart right now. These mechanisms, most people would just be afraid, those are scare tactics. ADL, Greenblatt, they've been exposed for this, your work, and many others. It's about scaring people, anti-Semitism, violence, hate speech, and people just respond. They don't want, they know they've seen over the years what can happen if you don't bow to that. You lose your job, you get fired, you lose your personal life. And so people just cow to it. But today things have shifted, any thoughts on, there's a lot.
I just have a funny, because I don't know if you came across this article this morning that was basically calling out a bake sale or something for Gaza as ambient anti-Semitism, which that's just, I think that's starting to get into the satire range of things, right? That's starting to get very onion
there for a long time in my mind. But I know what you mean. It's just to the point to where I would call it desperate. It's an effort to just go, what else can we do? They're succeeding with their efforts of, as I would see it, spreading the truth about what's happening. And they just don't, let's just take that as a Zionist that's disagreeing with that. Just what can we do? We can't have violence. We'll get arrested. We have to call it hate speech, anti-Semitism, and it's not working anymore. It just gets more and more cartoonish. And the obvious point is by doing that, you're protecting or hiding real hatred. Real anti-Semitism.
Well, that's what I'm saying is, and I have a lot of Jewish friends because I went to school in New York, and some of them have personally reached out to me and said, "Hey, these videos that you're putting out, sometimes we feel like it's bad for the Jewish community or it's crossing the line." And I try to explain to them, I'm trying to do this on behalf of protecting Jewish communities, because once you start getting tied into this stuff, like there's no separating the anti-Semitism, because then you're literally saying, oh, the actions of a foreign country is tied into your religion, and you don't have any control over what that country does, really. So you don't want to be tied into that. You need to separate. And I try to explain to them, groups like the ADL, they only care about Israel. They don't actually care about instances of anti-Semitism that are against Jews. Like the Nazi stuff, they don't actually care about those things. They will allow that to proliferate just fine. But as soon as anything is like, oh, this is a pro-Palestine thing, we got to shut this down right now.
Yeah, right. It's hypocrisy at the end of the day. Again, even if you believe, which in most cases, I think even the ADL recently, I know, was called out for, I think it was the 400% increase in anti-Semitism, was shown to be largely Palestinian flags and protests, nonviolent. And so that's the idea, is they just will scream that against anything. But the point is, even if it wasn't like that, the same point applies. We all pretend when it suits our interest that you're allowed to speak and think what you want, but obviously that's not the case. You can hate almost anything in this country except Israel. You know, and it's just this is where people are finally going, okay, I get it. I see it. It's not about what they're trying to make it out to be. That's why I've done a lot of, like, a long time, but really a lot since October 7th. You know, Dan Cohen on the show, a Jewish person himself, you know, highlighting the lie of Zionism is Judaism. It is not the same thing. It is a bastardization of Judaism. And there's people that disagree with that. There's also a very, very large momentum of Orthodox Jewish communities in the world that go, I completely agree with you, Ryan. So it's very clear that there's something shifting, you know, but it's important that Americans at least try to parse through this. Don't take our word for it. Look into it. Look at James' work. He does a good job breaking this stuff down. I'm going to go to a part that from 5 Times August, and then we can, you know, go over a couple quick points of Epstein. Let's finish on that Israel point. He simply wrote this. I just think it's perfect. It's just I laugh out loud when I read this. I don't know how to break this down for a lot of you, but oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Oh, this is the wrong one. I grabbed the wrong one. Well, I'll read this. For what I was going to read is just the absurdity. It looked like the same one. He broke it down in a way that was the absurdity of the way it's gone with Epstein. Basically, you know, it starts where it is, you know, the evolution of it, where we're going to go after him, then we won't, then it's a hoax, you know, like the evolution of it, where just in your face, I'm not doing a good job representing it, but you all know the story.
This is a good point too. This is an interesting point too, in that powerful people, there's no accountability ever. And that's kind of the issue that they're facing, is that it seems to be, if you're in elite circles, nothing ever happens to you. And it's just getting to be too much. If you continue to see, and this is from a cynical perspective, if you continue to see the erosion of your own community and you see them getting away with everything, it's going to end in something bad, right? Because I would say, hey, you can probably get away with this genocide stuff, and we could probably still be arming Israel if we also had the same commitment to building our infrastructure in our cities, high-speed rail. If we had, you know, power lines that are now underground instead of above ground that are causing fires all over the place. If we had that same investment in American cities, and people were just kind of going about their lives and they don't see like a continuous decay, because that's something that's very disconcerting when you're walking around your city and you're like, wow, this looked better 10 years ago. Now it looks like shit. Yeah. And you're seeing all your dollars, like, oh, another $7 billion to Ukraine, another $27 billion to Israel. Then you start getting, hey, what the hell is going on here? And especially with the Israel thing, where now it's like, oh, I can't even say that we don't want our money to go to Israel. And there was that vote in the House, right, where like basically every single politician voted to spend more money over there. Even the ones like AOC or Jasmine Crockett, who are supposedly anti-genocide or whatever, they're like, oh yeah, we'll continue to fund this. Then you start saying, what the hell is going on here? And that's the same, I think, with Zohran Mamdani in New York, right? That's, I think, what's propelling his candidacy, is like he is out there saying, no, I'm going to be a mayor of New York. Like, I don't want to go to Israel. Like, why should I go there? I have Jewish people that I want to serve here. Like, I don't need to go to Israel. And I think people are starting to say, okay, that's becoming, I think, a litmus test going forward for a lot of politicians, is like, are you somebody who is controlled or not? Right? If you're like the mayor of some random city in Texas and you're saying, oh no, in order to get your funds released to help with flood relief or rebuilding, you need to have a commitment to Israel that you won't boycott Israel. That's starting to not work out anymore. So
it's becoming obvious, you know, and
it's becoming too obvious. Yes, exactly.
What's your quick thought on Mamdani in regard to the legitimacy of it? Like, I'm very skeptical of politicians. It's going to be a very long road of consistently following through with what they claim, which never happens. I've never seen that before I start trusting any of these people, or believing in them rather, or hoping that they do the right thing. But he has been saying a lot of things that I think resonate with a lot of people. Of course, the right is consumed, and I'm just as critical of a communist, socialist, or democratic government. I think they're all potentially leading to centralized power at the top. Government is bad, but the socialist aspect of it, the different elements he puts forward. But he's very clearly talking, like, you could call what he's doing America first, right? And so it's interesting. So where do you read him right now in regard to that? Do you think he's genuine?
I mean, I think he's a genuine person, as far as I've seen. As far as like he believes in these policies, right? I don't think he would be out there promoting these quote unquote socialist ideals if he didn't really believe in them, because there's a lot of just feeling towards that term. So I don't think he would code himself in that way. I don't necessarily agree with all those policies that he's proposing, especially some of the weird ones around, like, let's say, like transgender rights and all this stuff.
Right. To be clear, I wasn't referring to any of that. I'm just talking about the point you made about the Americans first versus Israel.
America. Okay, so I think he
really
is genuine. I do think that there's going to be some co-opting that happens. I don't know the degree of the co-opting, but I think he's already out there softening the position because he's trying to win over Democrats, endorsements and things like that. I actually think he doesn't need to do that because I think the Democrats are so weak at this point. Like, who cares about an endorsement from like Hakeem Jeffries? Like, that's not going to make or break your campaign. It really doesn't matter. Or Richie Torres or whoever any of these New York guys are.
Right.
That doesn't matter. But he is softening his position a little bit there. I do think eventually, if I know the Democratic Party like I do, they will all kind of go towards the center. They will all soften this position. If you want to gain power. And we're seeing that with AOC. I mean, I haven't had a chance to dissect too much and tweet about it, but like her vote against or her vote to continue to send money to Israel is a position to be a Democratic nominee for president the next cycle around. There's no other reason to do it. You have to get in with the donors. And that's exactly what's going to probably happen with Zohran Mamdani as well. I do give him a lot of credit for taking down the establishment in a primary. And you can now see also very obvious how much the Democratic Party respects the democratic process, right? Because you have now two candidates that are running as independents who lost in the Democratic primary, right? Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams. And if it was the other way around, imagine if Mamdani had lost and he's like, I'm still going on. I'm doing an independent run. That would be all the Democratic shills would come out and say, oh my God, this guy is so, he's this fascist, basically. He doesn't respect, democracy. And now you have two guys basically not respecting democracy and the process of how the party is supposed to function. Yeah. And that's where, for me, I'm politically homeless. I'm like, I don't want to ping pong back and forth between the two parties. Like, is there one party that's actually just going to put the needs of Americans first and say, hey, let's reinvest in our communities. Let's like rebuild our cities.
Yep.
Let's have like a nice environment so we can walk around and enjoy ourselves.
Or how about just whatever you guys decide that I should do, right? Like the reality of what it's supposed to be, right? Like not what I tell you we're going to do. That's what's so funny about it is that people are so disillusioned by this process. It's that I'm not even of the mind that in most cases our votes even really translate to the outcome. Not that it shouldn't, but we've been stolen from. But it's just so funny that we get to this point to where, we should just act on principle in everything, right? We shouldn't be voting on party line. It should be about whether the person you want to vote for in that moment is most in line with what you believe in. Which it sounds like you're the same. My perspectives, my principles, my political standpoints for any different thing, it are all over the map because when you stand back and don't let the party guide you, that I think is how it's supposed to be. It's like you're being guided on what you believe in, not necessarily what you think the other team or your team wants from you. But yeah, it's just I think honestly, actually, one point, ask you that question: where do you think the country is in regard to that? In regard to, so let's just say independent left and right. If you had to put a percentage on it, your opinion.
I mean, I think 70% of people are in that bucket now of independent, but it's just that what do you do when it comes time to cast your ballot as an independent? Do you still pick one of those two parties, or do you go with the third party? And I think there hasn't been, I think, a strong enough endorsement or win for a third party to give people permission to say, hey, I think we can go outside of the Democrats or the Republicans. I think it's going to take one high profile candidate, not even at the national level, but probably at the local or state level to get it done, to get people to sort of believe, hey, we can go outside of the two-party system. And I heard Thomas Massey talk about this a little bit on his Theo Vaughn podcast, where he's like, the two-party system is kind of very much embedded in our government from an infrastructure point. When he's talking about the back rooms, he's like, there's two back rooms there. There's only a Democrat back room and a Republican back room. Even if you're an independent, you're going to go into one of those two rooms. And so there's a lot of institutional, infrastructure in place to keep a third party from going in. But I think that in itself is not enough, because I think as long as you get a few people in there, I don't care if you caucus with the Democrats or the Republicans. The whole point is for the third party is to extract certain policies for your constituents to say, hey, I will go along with your bill here, even though I don't fully agree with it, but if you got to give us something. So without that third party interjection, and I think that's what kind of happens in Canada with the, for people who understand Canadian politics, with the Bloc Québécois sometimes, is that it's like a Quebec-based party. So they're able to extract, and you almost always need them to form the government. And so they're able to extract certain things from the major party to say, hey, we want like extra funding for Quebec. We want like language. We want, whatever the things that they need for their Quebec, sort of identity in their province, to say, we want these things. We'll give you whatever those things are. So I think that's kind of what we need to prove happens. And then I think the Democrats, with the AOC and the squad, that's what they thought they were going to be able to do from within the party. It's shown that they're not going to do that because they just want to rise within the Democratic Party. They don't actually care about the constituents as much. So we'll have to see if something like that translates. My hope is that at some point it will, but I might be too early on that call right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a point. I share your hope for that, and I would like to see something positive come of this. I just think honestly, I think we're at the point of like a dying empire stage. Like we are collapsing inside right now, and I think the problem is that whatever we thought that could have been, if there was ever a time where the party system we have is ever, we can see, like you said, in Canada, UK, there's just more of the same, but it's the same kind of false binary or whatever you would call it. It's an illusion. And at least that's what some people I would talk to feel the same way. But it's like, I'm at the point now where I think we need to recognize that we might not even be influencing that system. And at least, that's what I was trying to say last time.
Yeah, there's some nihilism going on here, but I would say to that point, we've gone through other tumultuous times like the Civil War. We literally kind of have the country ripping apart, and we were able to recover from that. So I would say it's always good to like kind of hold out, not just hope, but also put things in place where, for me, it's like, hey, I believe in information. I want people to be educated. I think that is going to create a positive change, whatever that might be for you, that, personally where you want to put your efforts. But I think there's always hope in effort. It's like, hey, if I put in the effort, maybe something will come of it, because we've been shown in the past, like, hey, there have been other times when the country looked like it was really going to rip apart, but we've shown the resilience to come together. And I think, hey, there is potentially something that could come together to, let's say, get these Epstein files released. Like there's something that could happen to say, hey, we're going to bring some people to justice. Maybe it's not all of them, but maybe, give us Bill Gates, give us a couple people, and we're going to prosecute them, and we're going to restore faith in the American government. That's what is necessary, right?
Okay, but see, here's my thought. I agree with all, like, so just to clarify my point is, I agree. That's exactly what I'm saying. But from the people's perspective, not like I share I'm not a statist. I don't believe government has to exist. But I understand we live in a world where that is the current reality, and if we're forced to live within that, for example, like the Constitution, I think is important. But my point is that the government, the current government structure as it stands, I don't think is currently salvageable. I could be wrong, right? But I think that the problem is if we're trying to fix a broken system, or rather, like, something that is broken beyond repair, and all we're seeing is people continue to funnel into it, possibly from a foreign country that's keeping it that way to maintain this ability. Look at it this way. It's the same way the U.S. government keeps states failed so they can take resources. And, we may very well be in that kind of position. And it's worth just considering that. That's all I'm saying is that, maybe voting through a broken system that doesn't care about your vote is not the only solution out of this. But
I'm with you 100% on that point. Do things outside. I think more good for the country can come from like outside of politics than inside politics, right? There's things I'm working on in the background right now that it's in its infancy, but I will share when I'm ready to share. But like there's things that we're trying to do as a community, as people with some influence, not the the largest platform, but there's things that we're doing to like build in. Hey, how do we restore like Main Street in America? How do we restore these community values? And there's things, and all of the things that we're talking about within the people that I'm working with outside of government. We're not going to go. The answer is not to vote harder or to like get elected or anything like that. It's to build in the proper incentive structure and and infrastructure in place to make people act in a certain way. That's, in my opinion, good for America, versus like right now, what I see is the country is basically getting strip mined, where we're selling off parts here and there, just to make it to the next quarter, where we're going to sell off more things. And with this, the same with the debt. I think in government, I would like to see, I think one or two things can actually shift people's opinion of it. Like, for example, if Donald Trump were to be able to, let's say, reduce the deficit, if they would have passed a budget that was a surplus, I think that would have gone a long way in terms of giving him the leeway to maybe get away with this Epstein stuff, to say, hey, I got this done for you. I'm restoring America. Like, we're on the right road here. I can't give you everything. Like, this is bad, but I can't give you everything. People would give him so much more leeway. But right now it's like every single thing that he's promised, basically, he's failing on in a lot of ways. And you just can't sustain that over a period of time, because then now nobody believes what you're saying. Like this whole Pam Bondi going to release the general, whatever what is it called? The federal grand jury thing for Epstein. It's like, who cares about that? There's no information in that. That's obviously a ploy. That's going to be the binder 2.0, right? All the information in there we probably already know.
It's funny is Paulina Luna was calling it phase 3, and I'm like, 3?
Where's the second phase?
Phase 2, which is kind of funny. But let me rapidly go through these really quickly, and we'll end with the Israel part, because I for the podcast I'd mentioned these. I want to make sure they saw this. So the first one was, this is what I thought I was looking at first. It's just funny to read. It's 5 times August breaking this down. He says, so I follow. Trump knew Epstein, but kicked him out of his club for his behavior. But he never went to the island. But he understands that very bad things went on there. And in 2019 said, we need to find out because Bill Clinton went there, right? Because there's bad things that happen there, because it will tell us a lot about the situation. But anyone who wants to today keep the story going is a bad person and a weakling, because the story is actually made up, boring, and there's nothing there at all. Even though Bondi said they received truckloads of files and there were over 250 victims, but that's because Obama, Biden, Clinton, and Comey made it all up now. And it's actually a complete hoax. But now they're going to unseal the grand jury testimony, even though it's apparently all made up. It's just like, it is. You couldn't have written a worse script. Like, this is where I'm like, when I really think it through, I'm like, don't they have teams that go through these things? Like, it just felt ridiculous to me. And then here is the one that you mentioned, and I do think it's important. And this is about going back to the point about Obama. And I agree with this. This is what I was saying in regard to them doing this. It's important that we hit, and I agree. What they're showing you is obvious. But I don't think we were that. I think most people were aware that Obama, or rather just the U.S. government, was conducting this psyop. But Obama, most importantly, and he should go to jail for this. But I think a lot of them should, for a lot of reasons. The point is that now, as you pointed out, it seems very odd. But I think it's interesting that this is where I think, and it seems like we agree on this. I don't think anything's going to happen. I don't think Obama will go to jail, like we never see anybody go to jail. And that's the real point. He goes, I don't know how to break this to a lot of you. Barack Obama isn't going to be arrested. Same reason Epstein won't ever get arrested. Same reason Comey won't be arrested. Same reason Fauci won't be arrested. Same reason Zuckerberg won't be arrested. Same reason Bill Gates won't be arrested. Nobody you want to go to jail will go to jail. You've been conditioned to perpetually allow very bad people to get away with their crimes in exchange for internet memes and fun sound bites. Now, you could argue that's a little black pilled, like it'll never happen. I argue that we can, like we're kind of both saying that we're fighting to get to a place to where that can happen. But as we stand now, I agree with them. I feel like that's where we've been kind of set. This is something that Loomer put out, Kash Patel, Bongino, and Bondi with their memo, the lack of transparency from office regarding the Epstein files. Source tells them, bottom line, breaking over the.
Yeah, so that to me, Peter, that is like, they've already played that card too many times, and it's not been true, where Trump is like acting like he's mad at Israel and this and that, and it's like, or Iran, and then it's like, it was actually a whole ploy to misdirect. So I'm like, is this a misdirection thing as well? Are they actually mad? Are they actually pissed off? Because it seemed like all of them had signed off on it.
Yeah. I mean, it feels very much like theater to me, but I guess we'll find out. And Bondi, the firing of Comey's daughter, and kind of in the same direction felt. And what's weird about the Russia thing too is that Trump, before this bombshell came out, the Gabbard files, I guess it's being called, he's been floating this, right? The reason Epstein was a hoax is because Russia, they faked Russia. So it kind of felt like they were priming you for that. It felt very contrived. And the same thing you said about Bondi says she's ready to move to tomorrow to unseal the grand jury. And anybody seen this rerun before? It feels like we've seen this before, I want
to make a quick point about because the Comey, the prosecutor, I think she totally bungled the Diddy trial as well. And that's kind of a parallel here, where they're getting him on that, I don't want to say small stuff. I mean, they're getting him on the sort of the prostitution, but they're not getting him on the RICO charges, because it's like, if he's racketeering, then there must be people that he's racketeering with, and we don't want to get into that, right? That's the whole another thing.
Yeah, it's just like with Epstein, right?
Exactly. So it's like, no, he was just doing this. It was a very isolated incident. He's doing his freak offs, and that's all that happened. And it's very much in the same. Very, very much parallel to what happened with Epstein. Is like just a narrow investigation. There's no other bad players. It's just him being a bad guy. This one's just Diddy being a bad guy, and nobody else was involved in it.
And it's the interesting point of Trump coming out, which does feel kind of like it was a clumsy reactionary statement that it was a hoax, but that now, at least as it appears on the surface, you got Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers going, well, okay, well, if there's a hoax, then that means there was no trafficking, which then why is she in prison? It's like that doesn't make, and so now her lawyers at least seem to be going, well, we want to, appeal, and they're pushing back on it. Now that could be more theater than we realize, but maybe it is just incompetence and clumsiness, that you opened the door for that to come out. I expect some kind of a backroom deal like usual that might let that not happen. This was the clip we referenced earlier of Sagar and Tucker, and the point being that we all know they're lying, and this was a signal to the bad people that will protect you, which I agree with. I'll just go past this for time. Just the interesting point of Sagar saying, here's a list of Israeli prime ministers, all linked to Epstein, all the way up to Netanyahu. There's an important overlap to all of this. But let's talk about, and I'll just briefly, since we're already about an hour, let's go over this in regard to Israel. Here's your video, which I recommend you all watch, of the point we referenced earlier of whether Kash Patel is dating a Mossad agent. That you put out a great investigation around, is Israel spying on the world through VPNs? We touched on something recently about that. It's alarming to see all these interconnections, or the carbine aspect, or let me actually just play this clip, and then we can just finish on talking about all of this. I put this out. Stephen Miller, everyone, White House Deputy Chief of Staff and proud Zionist. I don't know if you saw this, but you might find this interesting.
Issue of the Iraqi civilians. I think that as many of them should survive as possible, because the goal of any military conflict is to kill as few people as possible. But as for Saddam Hussein and his henchmen, I think the ideal solution would be to cut off their fingers. I don't think it's necessary to kill them entirely. We're not a barbaric people. We respect life. Therefore, torture is the way to go, because torture people can live. Torture is a celebration of life and human dignity. We need to remember that as we enter these very dark and dangerous times in the next century. And I only hope that many of my peers and people who will be leading this country will appreciate the value and respect that torture shows towards other cultures.
So he's drunk when he's saying this, right?
I don't know. It's 2003, but the point is that he could be joking. Like, that's kind of the feeling you get.
No,
yeah. Go ahead. What are your thoughts?
No, my first reaction is like, oh, he's just having a little fun in the back of the bus with his friends, and it seemed like maybe they were coming back from something. They probably had a few drinks, and he's just doing a caricature kind of situation. But there's a lot of truth in these kinds of moments, because I have these moments myself, but with other different issues. But if you were to capture that, they're like, oh, wow, this guy is insane. But I think he just believes in those kinds of things. It's like there's so many truths that come out in these kind of moments.
If that was if he had a life of peace and happiness, that wouldn't mean anything, right? But you could look at his track record. You can look at what he's doing. Like we said, he's the chief architect of the ongoing, kind of like building police state of this country. It's clear to me that there's more there. He's a very proud Zionist. He's actively, in many ways, I've shown. I think I could point blank say acting for Israel's interest at the expense of Americans. And so when you see these kind of things, not that those two things necessarily have to be connected, but it just kind of shows you a building problem of kind of rampant lawlessness, this might makes right kind of idea that people like that have gravitated to the highest levels of power. And so other than the Miller point, I just think he is a very big problem for this country in a lot of ways. All of that together, the VPN infiltration, Israel, Zionism, Mossad, the is this country being infiltrated by a foreign power? Like, let's just kind of talk about that for the last 5 minutes about, because you've done a lot of great work on that it seems pretty clear that you think that there's more than people want to acknowledge. So I just want your thoughts on where that, from last we spoke to what you see today.
Yeah, absolutely. It just seems like over the course of history, there have been more and more of these types of projects that Zionists have used to try to say America is one with Israel. Like, that's the biggest thing that they're trying to accomplish, because the fact of the matter is, I don't think Israel could survive without America's support. I mean, you can see that through government, through the United Nations, and how many times that the United States has used their veto power just on behalf of Israel. I think it's more than, half of the vetoes of the U.S. has been on behalf of Israel. And all these other things, if you're tied into, let's say, the media or through technology companies, right? There's so many of these projects that are interrelated, and there is a purpose to all of this. It's to basically make it so you can't separate from an economic perspective. And then you add on top of that this cultural element to it, where all of a sudden, if you start to just say something to, let's say, hey, we should just maybe reevaluate our foreign policy, that's now a form of anti-Semitism, to say, well, now you hate Jews, and you want the second coming of the Holocaust, even though while they're, at the same time, Israel, you could argue, some people say genocide, other people are saying, hey, this is kind of a Holocaust situation that's happening. This is very similar parallels that are happening. So I think that's the project that they've embarked on over the last 40, 50 years. And it's worked really well. But now, as the material conditions of actual Americans, like I said, are decreasing and getting worse, can you hold this together? Is this still tenable, right? Because because they haven't given, it's like, why should we invest so much in Israel? Why are they enjoying the spoils of, let's say, free healthcare and free colleges and all this stuff that Americans don't have access to? What's in it for us, right? That's for all the America First people out there listening. That's the big question. It's like, what are we getting out of this relationship, right? It seems like sort of an abusive relationship where we're just doing whatever they want us to do and we're getting nothing in return. And I don't think I think long term, I don't think it's tenable without some sort of like extreme censorship in place.
Yeah, which is what we're seeing, in a lot of ways. And like I mean, it's just the joke somebody made, Steve from A and Wake Up, the snowflakes and the broflakes. It's just like the right version of the same game, but, with slightly different. But I mean, even anti-Semitism was a part of the woke side too. It's just about using these, about identity politics, censorship based on speech, hate speech, and, maybe, pronouns versus anti-Semitism. Like that, to me, it's the same thing. Even like the Build Back Better, Great Reset, Big Beautiful Bill, it's like you just see so many different parallels in the same direction of all these things. I think that what we're kind of like grappling with as Americans is that a lot of what we've been taught, what we understand, it may be at one point being true is not true today. Like the ideas we have, but the whole point is that I think, at least I will speak for myself, that I'm fighting for is to get back to that point. I got the same sentiment from you, to fight back to what we believe we should be. And that's like the most quintessentially American thing that we can discuss. And that you, like you said, though, you talk about these things and in many ways you get called racist or anti-Semitic or hateful or an apologist for something out there that the government's fighting. It's
or Chinese spy. I get the Chinese spy all the time as well.
Yeah, right.
I'm the agent of the CCP. Where, I'm trying to infiltrate America. Because whenever I talk about Israeli influence, they throw back, well, you're a Chinese spy, so you're actually here on behalf of another foreign nation.
Well, I mean, the point is always for anything, and as I'm sure you would agree, like people accuse me with the most ridiculous things. I'm like, sure, question that.
Yes, that's how I respond. It's like, I might be a spy. You should look into it.
Right. But the point being is like, okay, but now present your evidence. Feel free. Here's your floor. Go for it. And the point is, it's all insinuation. Well, this and that, nothing that's actual, even evidence, let alone proof. But that's the thing, is a lot of what goes on today in the mainstream alternative media is just insinuation, team sport politics. And I honestly think that the American people are getting tired of all of it, which I think is kind of where we are right now.
I know. And that's worrisome, because like, can you sustain a cohesive society if more and more people are becoming nihilistic, right? If everybody is sort of on the edge, what does that look like? I think last night there was a driver, I don't know all the details, but a driver that plowed through 30 people in Los Angeles. What is he dealing with? Like what made him go to those ends? Because for me, I'm like, if things are going well, I'm staying at home, man. I don't need to do that, today. And for that's like all these things, like with the Idaho firefighter situation, where that guy was, started a fire to take out some firefighters. Like, what is going on here where we're getting more and more of those instances? And they're definitely not, Iranian terror cells or whatever that people, Laura Loomer folks are saying. It's like, oh yeah, no, that's an ISIS terror cell over there. Or the guy in New Orleans, that was obviously a jihadist because of his Quran that's opened in his bedroom or whatever. I think we have, fortunately, people like you, like the independent media ecosystem is just not the same as it was in 2003. So these tactics, this kind of information ecosystem is so different that it doesn't work anymore. You have the Candace Owens of the world, Tucker Carlson's, who are like, no, this seems wrong. I don't think that the analysis is correct, and they're presenting their evidence of potentially a different theory of what's happening. And enough people are listening to it now where they say, oh yeah, that seems off, or that seems off. And you're not getting this kind of like cohesive bought in, like, oh yes, Iraq met weapons of mass destruction thing anymore. I think even in this scenario, I made a sort of a post the other day when they were sending the USS Nimitz into the Gulf. And I said, hey, do you guys remember the USS Liberty? I'm just saying that it's a very big possibility that if something happens to it, false flag, you should consider that. And then there was some article that was written and says, no, the USS Nimitz will not be destroyed in the false flag operation.
I laughed about that on the show. The fact that it wasn't like, it's not, like it's not going to happen. It's like, how could you even make that statement?
That's like, what an odd thing to say. That was the meme I was posting. It was like, what an odd thing to say.
But see, now they're going, see, we told you it didn't happen. But it's like, you could have never known that. Of course it could happen. It's just
a lot of people are posting underneath. It's like, I think I just prevented the false flag from happening. Because if I just say it out loud, then it's like, okay,
yeah,
that's not going to, like, that tactic is no longer, it's off the table now. You got to do something else.
Yeah. That's a good point to make, though, because obviously the point of a false flag is to not have it be, if everyone's going, this is what's going to happen, they're going to go, well, okay, we'll do it later at a different point, but that ruins the whole thing, right? But it's just, but I think there's something to that, though, that, because you'll never know for sure, right? Maybe it wasn't going to happen, but that's what we did. I think are one of the important parts of what we do is about trying to, present people with data points for them to come to their conclusions. And just by putting it out, you may very well have saved people's lives. Maybe not.
Yeah,
but I mean, really though, it's an interesting thing to think about. But that's why it's so important that we stick to our principles, our integrity, and we're honest, and we do things based on the truth. Which is why I respect your work. I think it's important.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ryan. I very much. I think people like you have been at it for so much longer than me. I think I'm relatively green in this space, and the only reason why I joined it is from what I saw behind the scenes in the corporate world and through COVID, right? I know you did a lot of reporting on that, and what I saw behind the scenes of like, wow, these companies who are out there saying they care about science are making big time unscientific decisions. They're making financial decisions, and I saw it firsthand, and it's not for the good of the American public. It's not good for health, and that's one of my big, motivators in getting into this space, because I got to be honest with you, I was making $250,000 just making PowerPoint slides for Big Pharma. And that was it was a good life. I make way, way less money now. I got to put it out there. So this, for people who say, oh yeah, I'm in it for the money and this and that, this is not the way to do it. I'm going to be 100% transparent there.
I'm glad you said that. It's just such a funny thing I've dealt with that my entire career. It's just funny where it's like, if you think I'm doing this to make money, you have no idea how this actually goes. It's like, it is for one of the most, clearly there are ways. I'll point out that, of course, if we came on and we're just like rah, left versus right, we'd probably make a lot more money or a lot, but it's the truth in this industry is not profitable. And I think a lot of people are, beginning to see that, but it's just, I tend to think those are people trying to shout you back from, trying to make a benefit from doing it the right way. That's what I think that is.
Right. And then that's something that it's a true North Star for me. It's like, I will always remember why I got into this thing is not for the money. So like when I make decisions, if there's anything that would compromise my ability to say what I want to say, and I might be wrong in terms of what I'm saying in the moment, but if there's anything that compromises my ability to at least give my perspective on things, that's the day that I'm ending this venture, because that's not what I'm here for. Like, I'm not here to become, I don't want to denigrate anybody. I'm not here to become another Charlie Kirk kind of figure who has been extremely successful. And that's a person who's made a lot of money in media, but he's serving a particular purpose. I'm here in terms of just giving people different perspectives on what the truth might be. I don't know what the truth is, but I'm saying, hey, for example, the false flag. I'm saying, hey, this is something that happened in history. You guys should know about this. So in case they come out with more information, you should scrutinize that information to make sure that it's true. And that's my function here. And there's not a lot of money to be made, calling out the U.S. military industrial complex or the Imperial Project. These kinds of things are very unprofitable and could get your TikTok and platforms banned, and all of a sudden, my main source of income is gone. So over the last week, I'm like, oh shit, I need to figure out something. If I don't get that account back, I've lost 75% of my income. So what should I do at this point?
Yeah. And see, that's the struggle, and I think it's an interesting shift in all of this, where one thing I keep talking about, and like, I personally kind of sense this in like Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out and really making her statement about the amendment for not funding Israel. I agree with everything she said. And I don't know what her intentions are. I'm very jaded when it comes to politics. I think we have a right to be. I just said, I don't trust the intention, but I'm glad she's saying it. My point continues to be that if we see people saying what we know is right, raise it up. Yeah,
Raise
don't
it up.
support everything they do. Don't then just blindly trust the next thing they say, but hope they have the right intention, but raise up what's important. Start to show people out there who are new to this, even people that are dishonest, that they can gain more by being honest with the truth than they can by lying. You know, and I think that we can start to motivate people through those channels, even if they don't do it for the right reasons. At least we show people lean into this right direction. And I think we can change the field that way. I think we are. So hopefully we can keep that going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's just to tie back with the Mamdani point, I think people now respect the truth. They respect people who just give their opinion about something versus somebody you could see, oh, wow, this is just acting against your morals and principles. So like, why are you doing that? Why should I trust you if you won't even act with good integrity? Right? At least I don't care how you feel about Marjorie Taylor Greene's other policies. You may disagree with them, but she might be wholeheartedly, I think she's one of those America First people who say, hey, I would rather have a white person working in this than a brown person. And I think that's probably what she believes. And that's something I disagree with. Mm-hmm. But she's doing it from a place of integrity at the very least. Even though I don't agree with that particular ideology, I'm saying, okay, she's there presenting those views. And here, this clearly aligns with that. It was like, hey, this is not an America First bill. Like, why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense for my constituents. I don't want this.
But go ahead.
And I'm just saying, like, I would rather support politicians like that who are true to their ideology versus somebody who's just doing the bidding of their donors.
I agree with that. And I actually, to your point specifically of even things that we may not, agree with or find distasteful, but if they, that they're acting with what they believe in, I would agree with that. But my point is, again, more so like, I don't know. My gut tells me I don't think she really means it. That's just, but nonetheless, it's like, yeah, she sees the benefit. Because, like I keep saying, it's like, so they look around and she goes, if I say this, Israel is going to come after me. I may lose the next election, blah, blah, blah. But if I can get this behemoth of the majority that clearly sees this on my side, that's more powerful than anything else, from a politician's perspective. And so good, let's motivate them to find the truth more profitable, to find it more, better for their career, and I really do believe that, and I'm glad to see more and more lean in that direction. So, James, thanks for being here, man. I really enjoy your work, and I'm glad to have this conversation. We should do it more often. I think your work is
absolutely, happy to come on anytime, Ryan. Appreciate you for elevating, the stuff and sharing. I think that's important in terms of helping each other in this ecosystem. That we're all in it together. That's how independent media works. It's if we don't come together here, they're trying to pick us off one by one. I could see in this space they're like, oh, can we co-opt you? Can we co-opt this person? Oh, you gain a certain size. Let's pick you off. So I think we can prevent that by kind of creating our own network to say, hey, no, it's better. To your point, right? We need to create an incentive to stay independent. It's like, hey, this is how you can build a bigger audience. This is, cynically speaking, where you should be. It's you want to create that cynicism where it's like, oh, it's better for me to tell the truth than to lie.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, brother. And I look forward to speaking with you in the future. And as always, everybody out there, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.